So I perceive a theme of stone guardians because we encounter the stone guardian, the gargoyle, at the beginning of the game, right? And that is a literal stone guardian. It's literally a kind of a mythological, gargoyle at the door, like a guardian at the threshold kind of image, right? Especially since it is designed as a Baroque kind of demon or whatever, right? But what I notice, the more I think about this game, is that this image appears again and again. First of all, for example, the first person you encounter when you exit the pub is one of those monk guys with a stone tablet. And they, whenever you get close to them, they specifically cherish their stone. They get angry that you're touching their stone. So the stone is a central element to them. And it's the sort of the first character you encounter when you exit the pub at the crossroads, right? Before you have to choose which direction to go, you encounter this person. Almost as in the myth of, encountering the devil at the crossroads, that kind of an idea. But the thing is that then this, I think, happens again and again in weird ways. So, for example, when Berry is kidnapped, she is kidnapped by one of the stone guys. So she crosses the threshold to the other world because of a stone person, right? Because she was living in her daily life, what was known to her, but she is taken away to another world by a stone person. It again also makes me think of Saint Peter, who is sort of, I think, considered the stone of the church, or is often depicted as being related to a stone, and is of course the also kind of like the guardian at the gates, right? I want to add that in an earlier video, I also explored the possibility that the bridge scene that leads us to Ooga Booga is also a sort of an echo of the gargoyle scene for several reasons, which are, I might as well go over them again. Just that they seem to be the only two bridge guardian scenes in this game, and both of them involve some sort of anal issue, right? The gargoyle has had a spike stuck up its ass, and now that blockage has been passed. He's gotten the spike out or something. And in the second one of the guards is permanently behind the rock pooping. So also there is some sort of anal obstacle that is being released, passed through. And both of these scenes are a scene of release and of passing through, right, of liberation. So there is, in both scenes, the sort of anal poop liberation and then the liberation of Conker to pass through the bridge. And I think that because of the similarity in the anal theme, there might also be a similarity in the rock theme, that both of them are a rock, essentially, in front of a bridge. In one case, the rock is alive. In the other case, the rock is just a non-living rock with a person behind it. But both exhibit this sort of rock in front of a passageway, and then you pass beyond that rock kind of thing. So we have all those things happening at the same time, but then I suppose I also want to try and mix it up, because another thing that seems to happen in this game is that there is a theme of blockages that get unblocked. For example, Sloprano is one of the famous ones, right? So there is a blockage of poo, you flush that blockage, and then you can move past. But then when you move past, you reach prehistoric world. And there, too, you encounter a huge stone god. So also the theme of stone reappears. A sort of a stone dinosaur god who also is suffering from some sort of a blockage. In this case, it's also another bodily fluid, but this time it's not. So you get rid of that blockage, and then you can move forward. What this god demands of you is a sacrifice. You offer a sacrifice to the god, and then the god speaks to you. In the case of Sloprano, this happens as well, because you essentially offer a sacrifice of sweet corn to the god. You're almost sort of throwing the sweet corn at the altar as if it were a sort of one of the Lovecraftian ancient gods or something. So okay, that is happening, and in that whole transition from Sloprano to the prehistoric world, it's a clear downward movement. You go down the toilet, and then when you reach prehistoric land, you go down further still. In fact, the entrance to the prehistoric land is a stone face. I mean, at this point, I may be pointing out stuff that is pretty classic in video games, right? There are a lot of stone objects in video games that serve as buttons or pillars or whatever, but still, mention it just in case. You enter the prehistoric land through this sort of stone face, and therefore that means that you're going down once again. Prehistoric world is even further down below, and it's a world that's based on prehistory, which is the past. So it's almost as if by going down, you're going further and further into the past of planet Earth in this case, right? You're going to a land where there are dinosaurs and cavemen and these kinds of images. So from a personal perspective for Conker, it almost seems as if Conker is kind of descending down into the past or going through some sort of a regression into the past himself personally too. The whole game is a flashback in a sense, because we start with Conker on the throne, and then he tells us, okay, this is what happened, and then we go back in time and we look at what happened. So from that plot kind of point of view, the game literally is a return to the past. We are going back to the past to see what happened in Conker's past to lead him to where he is now. However, in this interpretation, I want to focus in the ways in which the game is not a linear retelling of the story, I think, but that it is more of a symbolic retelling of the story. And as an example, one thing that comes to mind is Jugga, I think, the woman in Ooga Booga, in the Ooga Booga story. There's a conversation between her and Conker which seems to jokingly imply that they know each other, even though they don't, they just met. But it is framed in a way that where they both pretend to have been lovers for a long time or something. And Jugga says that, this will never work out. And Conker sort of admits that, okay, so I'll be good, I won't do all the things that I've done in the past, blah, blah. Of course, yes, this is a joke cutscene. Who knows? It may even be a reference to a film or something. But it seems as if here Conker is repenting about all the things that he's probably done to Barry, right? That he is enacting here with Jugga a kind of a goodbye scene with Barry. That's the feeling I get because of the fact that they don't know each other. So that what's happening here in the context of the plot seems to be a scene about relationships. In a broader sense, which is the theme of the game. Conker and Berry's relationship and how they are separated. So this takes me down a slightly sort of David Lynch path, because it feels as if Conker doesn't know that Berry will die at the end, right? Conker doesn't even know that it's over between him and Berry. He only knows that he went drinking and then woke up and is having a weird day. So these scenes, these vignettes that play out involving separations between men and women and unfaithfulness and things like that, it's almost as if the vignettes themselves are symbolically laying out the theme of separation, which again is something that I think Conker isn't aware of within the linear plot of the game, right? Conker isn't aware that there is going to be a separation between him and Berry. So in that sense, the game may be a retelling of the past, right? A reminiscing on the past from the perspective of someone who already knows what is going to happen. And in that sense, I think that the game isn't just a flashback, isn't just a linear retelling. And what is this Jugger scene? It's the culmination to the Ooga Booga scene. It's the final sequence. It's almost as if it's the revelation at the very end of the tunnel. He goes through this whole ordeal, and then at the end of it is this weird theatrical replaying of his and Berry's separation from my reading, right? And then what's extra strange about this is the fact that the Ooga Booga stage is somehow within the Sloprano stage, which is within the main hub. So you've gone down several levels. It's like you've gone down different levels of hell. And then at the depths of that, you found this sort of revelation about the fact that, there is a goodbye here. It's almost as if Conker isn't consciously aware of this goodbye, but he is aware of it in the depths of his unconscious. So he has to go down there to discover it and then return, which is what I was saying before about the possibility of reading this as a regression into the past, or into one's memories of the past, right? Well, since I broached this topic of motherhood with that last text comment, I feel like I should comment on it a little more, because this whole chapter of Ooga Booga has a few other mentions of the mother archetype. For example, Conker is the little dinosaur's mother, right? Or the little dinosaur thinks that Conker is his mother, and he is his mother in a sense because symbolically he sat on the egg and gave birth to the dinosaur in that sense. But then this sort of deep relationship between Conker and a dinosaur occurs again with the actual dinosaur that he uses to defeat the bone guy. Right, there is an intense relationship between them, a link, and saying goodbye becomes very difficult, even though they've known each other for just a few minutes, which is exactly the same thing that happens later with Jugger, only that in this case it's Conker saying the goodbye, and later he has the goodbye said to him. But in both cases, well, the same sad violin music plays in the background, but also in both cases it's relationships that, on the face of it, we as the viewer / player it doesn't seem like they've known each other for that long. So it seems like an exaggeratedly emotional goodbye. So it feels as if there is a strange triangulation between these three scenes, because these two dinosaur scenes, the dinosaur and the Jugger goodbye are similar, and then the two dinosaur scenes are similar, but one of them implies that Conker is the mother. I wonder if maybe Ooga Booga doesn't have an aspect to it which is of motherhood, since it's prehistory, right? It's the origin point for history. It's the archetype of the past, or the origin, which would be the place of birth. It's where things originate. It's the past, and not only that, it's where Berry is kidnapped too. She is kidnapped. So the place where she is kidnapped to is this sort of prehistoric place which resonates with the theme of motherhood. And we might as well mention that since there is a clear parallel between the Jugger scene and the Sunflower scene, they both have higher ground above them where money is kept, and so on and so forth. And they both have their breasts are emphasized, and they both elevate you to higher ground. I wonder if the emphasis on the breasts isn't also symbolically about motherhood, in the sense of, fertility, just archetypal notions of breastfeeding and something like that. I mean, there is an interesting sort of combination of factors with the bee king, because he wants to have sex with the sunflower, and it is framed as if all he wants is sex, right? He doesn't want a relationship. He just wants to have like a one-night stand kind of thing. But because the sex is framed in terms of pollination, it implies fertility, right? So yeah, I think that the game is drawing from that sort of deep unconscious sort of reservoir of id-like imagery, just stuff about fertility and motherhood and things like that. So it could be that this separation between Jugger and Conker is sort of a replaying of the separation between the baby and the mother, a kind of coming of age thing, right? That Conker needs to let go of the mother archetype, or incorporate it within himself, or something like that. Anyway, let's return back to the theme of separation as it plays out in the game. Just to give a few more examples of the Jugger scene, this general theme plays out in different places. For example, the queen bee, it is in the middle of a very similar kind of drama than the one Conker is in, but from a different perspective, right? Her husband has left home and he hasn't come back, and she doesn't know, where he is. She suspects he's with another woman. So this thing between the queen bee and the king bee is exactly what's happening with Conker and Berry, right? Berry doesn't know where Conker is, why he's, lied to her and abandoned her and hasn't come back home. In fact, in the scene where Berry starts to realize that something's happening, and she starts to realize that, hey, why, what's Conker doing? That's when she gets kidnapped by the stone people, by the stone guardian, and taken to the other world. It's almost as if that sort of awareness of, oh, okay, so this is what the situation is, sparks something. The Rock Solid nightclub even has the same password as Eyes Wide Shut, which is also a movie about, it is a movie that includes a theme of infidelity, unfaithfulness, and so on. In fact, I think the password Fidelio makes reference to this, to faithfulness. So Conker here, in this Eyes Wide Shut parody, is also in the role of the husband who is lying to his wife and has run away from home to do something else away from the wife. But also, keeping with the Eyes Wide Shut theme, it is all occurring in a dreamlike way where the events and the relationship and everything that's going on between them is more of a symbolic nature than a linear kind of progression of events, a linear sort of relationship. And just to give another example to show the way that I think this is occurring at different stages of the game simultaneously, is there are these two sort of crates, these metal crates in the farm, and one of the missions that Conker has to do is to get one of the crates, the female crate, off of someone's back. And the way it is framed is obviously a play on words, right? He's saying you've got to get her off my back, meaning, you need to make her stop pursuing me or stop controlling me or something like that, right? I feel that there is a play on words here going on where it is as if the man wants freedom from the wife, presumably so that he can have the freedom to cheat and so on. Again, within the language of movies and so on, it seems like the kind of sentence you would hear in a movie in that kind of context, in the context of someone who wants to be left alone in order to do whatever he wants to do, that kind of thing. And as I said, from the other perspective, even in the cogwheel scene, we have the theme of, in this case, the woman running away from the abusive man. So I find that very interesting. Another way in which this could be a regression into the past is just the fact that, as I said in the other video, there are a lot of themes of anal retentiveness, I think, in this game, or just an exploration of the simultaneous fear and desire regarding, I don't know what you'd call it, like anal control and lack of anal control, or something like that. Right? There is more straightforward Freudian thing going on, maybe. Because, again, as I said, there is not just mentions to anal sex, there is also just mention to sphincter control and poop and stuff like that. So it almost feels as if there is a theme of anal stage issues being explored, which, are childhood kind of issues, so that in order to explore them, a regression to the past is necessary. And it's funny because from what I know about this whole thing, anal retentive issues have something to do with material possessions and the desire for material possessions and the unwillingness to let go with material possessions. So this opens two questions for me, because first of all, the game is clearly and jokingly about money in a certain way, right? Because wherever the game has an opportunity to offer you a reward that is game-like, like a token or some sort of imaginary magical object, it will instead opt, in a tongue-in-cheek joke kind of way, for money. Like, cash prizes are the only kind of prizes you get. Again, almost in this sort of joke way, as if to say, what happens in video games like Super Mario when Mario collects so many coins? What does Mario want all those coins for? what does he have a desire for money? It's almost as if Conker's Bad Fur Day is exploring that topic. What is it about video game characters and money, and of course by extension, what is it about us and money? And so the game is a constant sort of money grabbing game where Conker is thinking of how rich he's going to be and all these things that he's going to have, all these possessions. On the other hand, all these themes of men and women are so often portrayed in ways where the men are possessive of the women as money, almost as some sort of an object, a magical object that gives them status and power. So the bone guy, the Ooga Booga bone guy, Carl and his cogwheels, the crate I was talking about. There are, the king and the queen, and then the king and the sunflower. I don't know. There are so many, just again and again, scenes where money, the way that the game is so much about money, gets mirrored with the theme of possessing your lover, which read from an anal retentive perspective is precisely that, an anal retentive move, to not want to not want to let go and to have sort of control over people. After all, it seems that the anal retentive issue also relates to authority, I think. So there's probably this fractalized way where the anal retentive personality is extremely accepting of authority, because you want to please the authority with what you have to give, right? The child is expulsing all this excrement and is very proud and happy about it because it feels good, because of it's a pleasurable experience. And if the parent doesn't, or the authority figure doesn't respond well to that, then there's probably you get stuck in that desire and you permanently want to please authority, which leads me to speculate that probably, on the other hand, you want others to respect you as an authority, right? I would imagine that's the shadow aspect of it, as in these cases, that basically you want other people to be under your control as material possessions, as excrement, as the excrement that you want to keep in your control. This issue of authority, though, I think is very interesting because, again, this is another one of the big themes of the game. Conker encounters people of higher economic status than himself, and they command him to run errands or to complete missions for him, and he does. He very willingly does, regardless of the morality or what it entails, right? If the mafia guy asks him to destroy the prehistoric village, he will. If, the Count Batula asks him to, bring him the villagers, he will. Yes, I know, in that situation, he's kind of bound to do it in a certain way, but still, it doesn't jar with all of the other moments in the game where Conker is free to choose, right? He's free to choose certain things, and as long as he gets money, he will say yes to anything. I find this very interesting because it disguises the situation, in my opinion. It's almost as if Conker is pretending that because he's doing it for money, he's a free soul, right? That he's under no one's control. He's not, no one is his boss. They think they are taking advantage of him, but actually he just is doing it for the money. So, he's winning in the end. But this theme doesn't, this attitude, which I personally perceive in him, even though, I'm reading into the game as I am in these videos, this attitude doesn't quite go hand in hand with how the game turns out, with the events of the game, which are that in the end, I feel Conker ends up bound. He loses his freedom precisely because he climbs up the economic ladder, right? He earns so much money that he becomes king. I think that you could read this symbolically, not just that he becomes literally a king, like, the next Panther King, but that because the game has been about accumulating material wealth and serving authority to do so, regardless of what the moral interests are, it's almost as if he ends up bound by that. He wanted to gain freedom by becoming rich, but he actually becomes bound by it. Yeah, I don't know. I find that very, very interesting. That way, because the whole game is about that, in a sense. The whole game is about Conker following orders. It's so funny when you see it that way, because on the one hand, the whole game is about Conker being a free spirit who doesn't follow any orders and who just does whatever he wants. But on the other hand, in a sense, Conker is a slave to money and by extension a slave to authority. He does whatever anyone tells him. And of course, he's always going to be offered money because people in higher authority have money. So he, you know what I mean? He thinks that he's doing it for the money, but not being controlled. But I think that the game kind of shows by the repetitive use of these kinds of vignettes and the way that the game turns this to this dark tone towards the end, that in fact the whole game is about Conker just following orders. He's just doing whatever he's being told to do. Because of course he's going to get money for it. That's sort of the way that he is being made to do whatever they want him to do. I don't know, it's funny. It kind of, I think, in the nighttime scene, gets poignantly shown by the war scene, right? Doing what you're told, following orders. And it's funny because I think that's what's so chilling about the threat in this game. The threat is that the Panther King is going to use Conker as an extra leg for his table. Conker is going to be used as furniture by the king. So basically, Conker is going to be used to fulfill the whims of the king. So it basically, it's a simple material expression of serving authority, right? Being furniture. He's going to serve the king. That's what's at stake, I suppose. And it's funny because in an alternate ending for the game, apparently when Conker became king, he would eventually end up using Berry as furniture for his own table. So it's as if at the end of the game, Conker would fully step into the shoes of the kind of person who had been his shadow from the very beginning or something. It's interesting how sexual this is as well, I think, because on the one hand we have the king as this big, muscly kind of strong person But as in the Ooga Booga scene and so on, I think there is a theme of impotence here, of castration. Because when the table falls, the expression "spill the milk" is used, which I don't know. In the context of the game, that seems like some sort of euphemism for ejaculation, and this is not pleasing to the king, right? It's like ejaculation, probably in the sense of premature ejaculation or impotence, castration, something like that. The image of a king without a leg, in this case a table leg, is a classic sort of Arthurian image of the Fisher King, which is often used as an image of castration, right? The king without a leg or an arm or a member of some kind. And so, if that were the case, if there is a theme of castration going on with the Panther King, then Conker is going to be used as a substitute phallus for the king as well. So it's as if Conker is not just going to be used to serve the whims of the king. Conker is going to be used to supplement the insecurity of the king's complexes around masculinity or something like that. It's funny then how this plays into the relationship between the king and his personal sort of furniture, his personal servant, von Krippelsback. Because there we have a clear example of this kind of relationship to authority that I've been talking about, right? On the one hand, Krippelsback will completely serve the king, will do anything that the king asks him to do, and at the same time is extremely hungry for power, extremely hungry to have his own army, his own power. And of course, visually, they are sort of reflections of each other because they're both in the same dilemma symbolically. If we take Krippelsback to also be, missing a leg, I think the Panther King himself, according to the story, cut his legs off or something. So Krippelsback is also a Fisher King kind of character, right? He's castrated, his legs have been cut off, and then the Panther King also, his leg has been cut off. So they're both in the same dilemma, but they're facing each other. And the way that the cutscenes at the castle are so far removed from everything that Conker is going through, right? It's like another world. When Conker finally reaches the castle, the king transforms into an alien, so we never even interact with the throne room or with the king. It's shown to us throughout the game just as cutscene, just as fantasy, never as an actual playable environment. So it almost seems as if it is just that, some sort of a cutscene that serves as just as a symbolic counterpart to whatever it is that Conker is going through, or something like that.